Hello, Martin Doyle here, and welcome again to my video production diary for my no-budget feature film, The Next Way. Now, this week I want to talk about genre, and it's something I wanted to kind of become more aware of before I started writing this script. I mean, at the moment, what I've talked about thus far is taking an idea to concept, and now I'm fleshing out the concept, initially using theme, and now I'm going to start looking at genre to flesh out the concept, and also how the story is going to be told. So my story is a science fiction thriller with fantasy elements to it. Now, obviously, that's three different genres I'm talking about here. Now, what is a genre? Well, we know a genre is a romance, or it could be a comedy. Basically, it's the style of story that I'm telling. So, when I say like, oh, let's go out and watch a comedy, we expect to go out and have a good laugh. You know, if we go out and watch a romance, we expect that we're going to be emotionally moved by the story as well. You know, when we go see a science fiction, we want to be intellectually as well as emotionally engaged with the story, and we probably want something that's going to make us think in a completely different way, or on a different level. So these are the kind of things we expect when we go and see films of this genre, and each of these genres have tropes within that genre that distinguish them from other genres. Obviously, I'm putting three together, and many films do this. You can get a romantic comedy, you can get a sci-fi thriller, you can get a fantasy adventure. The importance of this kind of cropped up during my planning phase, because when I started writing beat sheets, which is basically a breakdown of each plot beat, each moment where something happens that creates the overall thread of the story. Now, when you write a beat sheet, all you're doing is writing the beats. He walks in the room, he stands in the room, the lights go off, he runs out the room, okay? And that's basically an entire script written like that. That's a beat sheet. And so I wrote a beat sheet to my story, and I put it out for feedback. Then one person came back to me and said, I didn't quite like it, and they listed all their reasons as to why they didn't quite like it, and thought that this should happen and not that should happen. It was almost as if they were talking about a different script. They wanted it to be a different script. Now, this goes back to some other feedback that someone gave to me about my story outline when I originally wrote it, and they said to me, Martin, are you writing an investigative thriller or a conspiracy thriller? And I was like, okay, so what's the difference? And they said, well, what I'd like you to do then is just go read a book by Philip Parker called The Art and Science of Screenwriting. And this book will, basically inform you of that, and why these different beats and tropes that you find in genres are very important to understand before you start writing your story. So I read the book, and in there was a breakdown of the difference between an investigative thriller and a conspiracy thriller. And it started off with the investigative thriller, which was your main hero, the investigator, must be a professional investigator or something similar, who is used to and regularly solves and investigates mysteries. Now, the way I wrote my beat sheet, I just said, oh, it's a vlogger who vlogs a lot and lost his audience. So to the mind of the person that read the beat sheet, they were like, well, the rest of it doesn't make sense, because why would they ask this guy to investigate? What gives him the skills? So what someone wrote in the book about structure, about genre structure, and what the differences are between the different genres, was proved right by some feedback. We all know inherently, instinctually, what feels right within a genre, what works and what doesn't work. So obviously, in my full treatment, my hero is qualified to do this investigation. But from the beat sheet alone, it wasn't there. So it kind of reinforces why it's good to do research of different genres. And my challenge is this: I'm making a film for £15,000, which is is a small amount of money, and I'm not choosing one genre to do it with. I mean, £15,000 to make either a thriller or a sci-fi or a fantasy film by itself is very little money. And since I'm combining all three, it's a challenge, because ultimately, even though with my investigative thriller, I can't go to numerous locations, big glamorous places or different sides of the world, I've still got to tell a satisfying investigation movie. I can't necessarily afford, loads of special effects and lots of sets and, prosthetics and stuff like that. But I still have to tell a compelling science fiction story, where the science fiction is important to the plot to an extent that if I took it out, I couldn't tell the same story. The fantasy elements still have to be really engaging to the point where people feel as if I've shown them something magical, an alternative, and a possibility within the emotional logic of our personalities. So by researching these different genres, it's allowed me to select the main structure of my story, which is the investigative thriller, which is inspired by neo-noir or noir storytelling. And then it's allowed me to put the other elements into the story in a way that will work as an overall piece of cinema. And the other thing I started to research was the structure of cinematic storytelling, to make sure I am conscientiously and clearly communicating the story to the audience in a fresh way, or an original way, or at least with my own unique voice. Okay, so that's this week. Next time I'm going to talk more about how I'm going to set out the story and the structure. And I'm not going to talk too much about characters and stories within themselves, because ultimately I want to surprise everybody. So next time we're going to talk more about story structure and treatments and beat sheets. So until then, keep cool, and I'll see you all next time.